Cool. Well, let's just get started. I feel like generally speaking, we run out of time, and that's cool. We'll save questions to the end if we could, the last 10, 15 minutes. But really briefly, for those who don't know Chong Han rather, I'm really thrilled to have him. I'm really, truly excited about this session. He's a dear friend of mine. We go back several years, and I admire Chong Han from a personal and professional standpoint. He has this really rare combination of deep empathy. He really cares about what he's doing. If he doesn't see the why of why something's happening, he will try to find that why, or he just won't participate, meaning he needs to be part of something that he finds empathy and he finds something that is interesting in him. And I think that's a really rare combination. Most people just kind of take the job and, you know, we need to take jobs, we gotta make money. But Chong Han is very selective. And he also impresses me with his design mastery and UI, UX and technical insights. It's unfounded what Chong Han knows. So over the past 2 decades, Chong Han has really shaped his digital experience across large and small companies. He was the leading UX for Outlook at Microsoft, which I think you also worked with Pete on that. Is that right, Chong Han?
Yeah, Pete and I go way back. So
yeah, and you go even farther with Pete, and that's kind of how I know Chong Han, is through a buddy of ours, Pete, and Ryan Young. But anyway, you then founded and scaled your first design forward AI startup, Layer Next, and then you currently have a stealth venture, and you have so much else going on. It's hard to even put it into one sentence. So today's conversation is really going to center around something that is really important in AI, UI and UX. It's something that sort of has become an afterthought. I think everyone's realizing the importance of it. I'll just put it in a very quick example, and then we're going to get to asking questions to Chong Han, and I'm not going to say much more because I want to hear what he has to say, but it reminds me of just ChatGPT. And when ChatGPT became very popular in 2023, it wasn't that GPT didn't exist. Of course, it did in various forms. But as Devin likes to say, I like to hang on to, it was the UI interface, the queryable interface that made the difference and brought AI into everyone's home and made it functional. So UI UX is key, and it's sometimes an afterthought when really it needs to be one of the first things you think about, because that's how users are going to look at your experience. Last little thing, I always bring things back to medicine. As a head and neck surgeon, no one cared, for the most part, what I did underneath the skin. And that was all I cared about. But it was how I closed them and how the suture line looked is all the patients cared about. That's the UI UX. So keep it in mind. It's very important. That's what people care about. So that's why we have Chong Han here. And I'm going to start out with just a very broad question. How do you define good UI UX, Chong Han, in the context of AI software? And how does that differ from agentics to other AI to anything else you've seen in your journey on UI UX?
yeah, no, it's a great question. First off, thank you, Ross. Appreciate you inviting me to this conversation, and a lot of kind words. I don't know if I can live up to that. But no, back to your question. It's a great question. I think, I've been thinking about this quite a bit. I think let's first sort of acknowledge, right? Like ChatGPT is sort of the mother of all UI UX, if you will, right? I think, like you said, before ChatGPT, like GPT-3 was a thing, right? It was sort of like awkward, kind of hard to use. And there was really this moment. And the way I thought about it too is also like it established, right? Basically turn-taking conversation as the de facto interface into AI or large language models specifically, and really brought it to the consumer, right? It's the mother of all, as they call the mother of all demos. So this is like the mother of all UX for AI. But I think sort of to sort of maybe answer your question, when I thought about it a little bit, I think it's worth thinking a bit about sort of what types of what types of AI products are there. And in my mind, I did a bit of a categorization, and I think there's probably roughly like 4 types. You could say there is like things that are AI enhanced, right? So things that you do today, and you sprinkle some AI on top of it that helps you, like summarize the article. It helps you autocomplete, do things like that. There are things that are AI transparent, right? So you use it to do something. It's using large language models or AI models behind, and you don't quite know that. I think a lot of maybe data retrieval projects can look like that. A lot of search, a lot of workflows are that manner. there is like generative AI as is, right? Like Midjourney, like, VO3, all these kinds of things where the output is the product. And there are things that are, I think, starting to emerge maybe circa 24, 25, this couple of years, where we are looking at like AI native things, right? I think the main characteristic of an AI native product is something where it is delegated to the AI, right? The AI is actually doing the decision making. And I think that's pretty new. So anyway, I say all this because I think the taxonomy is interesting because I think the implications for each one of these ones are different, right? So I mean, if you talk about design just as a general idea, right? It's like who's the user, what are they doing, what are they trying to accomplish, right? Like the basics. And sort of you put it into this context of like, which type of product they're working with. I know I'm going a little broad here, right? So narrow me if this is helpful. But yeah, I think that's how I think about it, right? Like what task is the user trying to accomplish and how does the technology in this case help them accomplish it? And does it do the work of helping them accomplish that? And in that sense, maybe one thing I would say here is that language models I think we are all trying to figure out what to do with it. So that there is that aspect of that as well. So anyway, I don't know if I answered your question. But yeah, I think getting people what they want is really the core of a good UI design.
Right. I think succinctly put, if it's easy to use and people are going to adopt using it without much workflow changes, or it's not too much of a bottleneck, or it doesn't create another pain point, give the customer what they want, whether it's your product as a whole or the UI. Makes perfect sense. And you absolutely answered the question. Going to go maybe a little off script, not that there's much of a script, just for the audience. We have general questions that we have just to keep things going, but this one I might catch you off a little off guard, but I think you're gonna have a good answer here. From your time overseas, which we don't have to go into that, but you have such a cool story and such a cool background to today. How have you been able to advance your understanding of UI, UX, or AI and adapt? It's a learning process. Like, it's not just you wake up one day and you adapt to MCP as being the next thing. That didn't exist about a year ago, December. How do you learn new things around AI and incorporate those into your day-to-day?
Yeah, it's I would say about 5 to 10 years ago, that's this whole big debate within the design community about whether designers need to code. We don't have to rehash that, but I think I come down to on the perspective that if you think about design as a profession, what we really do is we are taking like to put it in maybe industrial design terms, we're taking these materials, right, like wood, like metal, and we're trying to construct something with it. And in the digital realm, it's similar, where you are taking like software, you're taking GUI, you're taking buttons, right? Like however you think about it, they're the materials that you're constructing things with. And I think a crucial bit of that is you kind of have to really understand what the material can or cannot do, right? So if you're building like a chair out of like of wood, right? I think that like a famous mid-century thing is they discovered how to bend tubes to create these like very nice shapes, and they started building these chairs around the Bauhaus movement and things like that. And it is both like a technology development as well as an understanding of how to weld that technology. So just sort of a long-winded way of answering your question. I think there is no substitute for hands-on. Right. I think we could speculate about, let's say, what AI could do, how like theoretical these things are, but I think there is no substitute for just really trying it out and really developing your opinion about what the strengths and the weaknesses of the quote unquote material is, right? And I think that's sort of the tricky part about design as a general principle. It's like, maybe it's the first time that I'm, looking into this, and through repeated exposure, you really get a better sense of what it is. And I think software especially is interesting because the is somewhat artificially defined. It could be an API. It could be, something like, for example, like how people train the models. So it's shifting and it sort of has different characteristics. It's an interesting space. So
yeah. That's cool, Chong. Totally can appreciate all that. maybe in a line or two, what do you finally think? What's your conclusion if you have one? Should UI UX folks like you know Python? Should you be hardcore coders? What do you think?
Oh, it's a tough one. I don't think you need to know it. I'm biased, right? I have a bit of a technical background, so obviously,
You went to Carnegie Mellon.
yeah,
You know,
I,
everyone should know
I
that. A great
enjoy it.
background.
I enjoy it, so that helps. I think I think you need to understand what is the nature of software, right? Like, I think sometimes design can be a little too abstracted from what it is. And I don't think you necessarily need to know how to write Python, but you should know what Python is, why, like what are programs, how they constructed, things like that, right? So that's sort of how, my thought. Yeah.
Perfect. Let's. I think this is a great question from Zach. What tools, softwares, frameworks do you use for project manage a team of designers, and also what interface with the technical side of the team?
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yeah. What tools, softwares, frameworks do you use to project manage a team of designers, and also interface with the technical side of the team?
I think specifically with product designers, we use the same interface as AI models. We use language. I think, yeah. I mean, when you're managing, I think people management is people management. So I don't know if let me think about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Right. I think a lot of this is communication, right? Like we're talking about like goal setting and things like that. But I think there's two parts of this question. One is like sort of how you manage a team. I think the tools that designers use are not that different from everyone else, like task management, like stand-ups and all these kind of things are sort of, part and parcel of the culture of a team, and it depends on the team as well. And I think the other half of the question is, how do you sort of interface with the technical parts of the team? I think finding a common language a common basis of understanding between the technical and sort of design teams is quite an important thing, right? Like basically, I think a big frustration sometimes that people see is because people are talking different things, right? I think that's because as a designer, one of the most important things that we have to do is sort of bring in the perspective of the user, right? We're bringing in the voice of the user, and the design is really a lot of times it's focused on like this is the user, what it's trying to accomplish, and I think trying to get common ground across the different stakeholders is actually one of the most important things that you could do. And there are different ways of doing it. You could write docs, you could draw comics, you could make videos and act it out. I don't think the communication form is super important, but I think spending time and getting people on the same page is super important.
Cool. Jonathan, that was a great answer. Going to switch gears a little bit, but this is something that's been very on my mind, just about something I'm writing about right now. About simplicity and transparency around UI UX. Not expecting anyone here to know the intricacies. I just happened to just read about it, but the EU has created this AI Act, which was technically May 2nd, which has passed. They were supposed to have like the second iteration, but they moved it back to August 2025. One of many of the stipulations, it's basically governing the EU and how to use AI, which I think is very important. And the US has followed suit, but more of the capitalist way that we
Sure.
follow suit in these ways. So it's actually pretty makes sense with our two different sectors, EU and in America. But the EU has said as part of it that by law, things need to be transparent and the black box needs to be revealed as much as possible. So that's actually a law. I'm not asking you to go into the law, but from either a legal perspective, but really from your perspective, a user experience perspective, how does simplicity and transparency work? How do you make that first as a forethought, or is this an afterthought transparency?
I think transparency is good. I think transparency should be there, but should be available. But I don't know if I think people will use transparency all that much, right? So I think there are different things. And so maybe let me sort of clarify a little bit about what I'm thinking. I think, maybe with regards to this law, we're talking a bit about, maybe thinking tokens needs to be explicit, perhaps sort of how the layers are activated needs to be explicit. There's some probably technical stipulations that it follows. I think from a design perspective, my question would be like, do your average end user care, right? I think, like, if you think about the user's hat, right, put on the user's hat, what they're trying to do is they're trying to do something, and it's probably really helpful if after the fact you come back to look at it and, you know, and diagnose what went wrong. But I don't know if that's a top priority for most people. But, you know, to direct, maybe more directly sort of answer your question with regards to simplicity and transparency, I think simplicity is a bit of a misnomer, right? I think simplicity and its sort of related cousin, intuitiveness, is actually, to me, it's about whether the product or the technology matches the mental model of the user, right? If you understand, quote unquote, understand how a system works, it is simple to you because you know what's going on. And transparency is a way of building up the mental model of a person, right? So I think, you know, when you are first approaching a technology, being able to see how it works and like sort of build your intuition for the technology, right? Let's say if you look at the thinking model, you're seeing that it's spitting out a bunch of like, hey, the user's asking this, are looking for this, and you're like, okay, this is kind of what it's doing. You do that a few times, after a while, it sort of loses its novelty because what you're going for as a user is like, I just want the outcome, right? I know that I may or may not even know why it's there, the thinking block, for example. But I think, you know, I think that's sort of the thing. And I think the related question too there too, I think the more important question about transparency to me is about control, like not control, maybe feedback, right? So like maybe I asked the model a question like, hey, you know, I like to do XYZ, and it gave me something. I'm like, oh, that doesn't quite feel right. What happened, right? And that's something that I could look through. And I think there are different ways where this comes into play and becomes really interesting. But I think it's just sort of as a simple question, you know, to answer the simple question, you know, I think that's sort of, to me, transparency has a utility, but I don't know if it's the foremost utility for users.
Yeah. Got it. Yeah, Devin, what's up?
Yeah, I just wanted to, it seems like transparency is mainly for managing liabilities. Like it's to look back if anything went wrong and to figure out why it went wrong, who's to blame, right? And what are the possible damages. Users almost never care. Like social media, all of the issues with social media and our data privacy and the algorithms and whatever, they've written a ton of papers, there's terms of service, there's documents, there's like a level of transparency, but no one reads that, right? From a user perspective, it's all about the legal. So I don't know, yeah, I think I align with you, Chong Han, where you immediately go straight up to the user, right? You put on the user hat, and the user just wants it to work ultimately, and for it to make sense, right? For the learning curve not to be steep, and for it to just work every time and trust it.
Yep.
Yeah.
No, I think the trust and confidence part is a big deal, right? I don't know for what reason when I think about AI, I always come back to like the five, you know, like self-driving cars is you know, they're both a pioneer and a great example for it, right? I think obviously everyone wants like a perfect self-driving car, never gets into accidents, right? Never, you know, but gets me there as fast as I can, and so on and so forth. These attributes that people care about in commute, right? But at the same time, like the technology is not perfect, and you have like, you know, all sorts of different ways that you're reflecting back to the user. I think that's sort of, you know, also things like, first, I'm cautious about, I mean, Waymo's around San Francisco now, so I love it. It's great. It's always a wonderful technology. It's amazing every time I see it, and I cease to be amazed. I cease to not be amazed by it, right? It's every time I get on one, it's like, this is the future. But the point being, like, I think when you first see one, you're cautious. You're like, what is going on, right? There's no humans. It's kind of crazy. And then they do a lot of stuff in their UI to kind of show you like, hey, this is what the LiDAR is seeing. And like they do a lot of work around that transparency. And after you take maybe like the third car or the fourth car, you're like, I'm just gonna like be on my phone and do my work and get me there, tell me when I'm here, right? So it's kind of interesting. We adapt to technology as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Great thoughts there, and great response there, Chong Han. This is something I'm constantly thinking of, and it goes a little bit back to something Devin brought up 2 weeks ago in the webinar. For whoever was familiar with it, it was an analogy or a comparison to Iron Man. And Chong Han, I'm sure you know a little bit about Iron Man. Doesn't matter what you know at the end of the day. But there was one scene which Devin showed, and I'm not going to show it, where I think it was in Iron Man 2, he comes home and Jarvis, his AI, like Mallory's our AI, basically just starts communicating with him and talking to him instead of him prompting it. And so the question really is, right now, our UI, UX really for AI agents is chat first and queryability. Is that a stepping stone? Do you think we're going to need to have that interface? Well, I mean, whether we have a microphone on us saying, hey, Jarvis, Mallory, do this, or we're typing, or is there going to be something in the future where it prompts us a little bit more like Jarvis? What do you think? It's a bit forward thinking.
I think it's gonna. I think we should. I mean, I think a lot of people are gonna spend a lot of money to try to get there.
Yeah, good point.
Is probably what I think. But maybe more specifically to answer your question, it's so I think of it this way, right? I think there was a paper, a book actually written by an HCI AI researcher like Terry Winograd, very famous professor back in the 80s, right? Talking a lot about sort of language as action, and he devised a whole framework around like AI. This is like the 80s wave about like language being an action thing. And I borrow a lot of inspiration from his work, and I think about like sort of what is the role of the chat box in chat agents today. If you think about it, there are a few things that it's trying to do, right? It's trying to capture your command, right? What do you want to do? It's trying to capture the context of the command, right? So like, I want you to write me a report about, let's say, how water use in San Francisco, whatever. And the context might be, I want to submit a report to my, like my supervisor about something. And there's preferences, right? I have a preference for, consult these archives, these things. There's also assumptions that I'm making, right? And right now, this is one box that you're capturing all these things. And if you look at a lot of the demos, like, Apple has made, Alexa Plus has made, it's really about abstracting out some of the context, right? Oh, in your email, your mom is going to come visit you and she bought a flight, and it's all unstated, because you could do all of this with open like ChatGPT or Claude today, right? You could just like, my mom's coming to visit, she bought this flight, blah, 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 right? And then you write a half-page essay and it does exactly what you want it to do. So I think sort of like, to answer the question about stepping stone, right? I think that we are in the process of discovering what language models are truly capable. I mean, sort of back to the AI native point, right? We are discovering all these things like, oh my God, if you give it like all these contexts, it's amazing, and it was able to do all these other things. And yeah, and after like, I think we will all collectively, right, work to like figure out how to make it easy. I think what was it? OpenAI has talked a lot about memory, right? Memory about you as a user, memory about the things you do. I think that's one set of technologies that we'll see a lot of, right? And then, how do you sort of know, like, let's orchestrate all these things on the back end, and back to the point, what Jarvis is able to do, perhaps in the future, right? You show up at your computer, you open it, you have like 10 unread messages, and then they're like, hey, instead of telling you have 10 unread messages, it's like, hey, your calendar looks pretty clear. Like, all these things are all about capturing context, right? Like building operations on context, knowing your preferences, right? Like, you would like to talk to Devin, but you do not want to reply to Chong. So like, things like that, just like embedding that into language models is sort of my sense of where things will go.
That's really very insightful. Yeah, I obviously would have to agree. Going to get a little technical, not too technical for the audience for the next couple questions, but with your technical prowess, I have to pick your brain here a little bit. So, what is your experience? And I'll define these terms, and let me know if you disagree with the definitions. But just have you experimented with progressive disclosure or multimodal interfaces, like combining visuals, text, voice, and what has worked? So for those who don't know the terms, my understanding at least, progressive disclosure is a term in like UI UX design technique where only necessary or minimal information is shown at first, and as you interface with it, more and more stuff comes out. Versus the multimodal interface, you have multiple outputs like visuals. That could be a graph, an animation, a text. That could be labels or just instructions, or voice, a synthetic voice. Tell me if you disagree with those definitions, and if not, what has worked for you between those two, or a combination?
Yeah, I think, I had this discussion with a friend recently, and I think it makes sense, right? I think every medium, if you will, or every modal has its strengths and weaknesses. A question I wonder a lot, actually, maybe I'll sort of turn this back to you too, right? It's like instructing ChatGPT to be, like something like ChatGPT or Claude, making it robust, requires a lot of text input, right? Some people prefer, like a lot of us today just type into it. I'm actually wondering why is voice input not as popular as it should be, right? Because it's pretty natural to us to talk to things, like talk to you, right? I could text you, but texting you is different from talking to you. So why are we not talking to our agents is a question. And I suspect part of the reason is because, I don't know, maybe part of the reason is because voice input, I think we haven't probably quite gotten the right level of fidelity, maybe in terms of like feedback or something like that. It's just not quite right? It's not supernatural. There's probably some other privacy or other questions around, like, I'm, working in an office. I don't want to, interrupt. I don't know. It's a good question. And so that's one half of it, the input version of this. And then the other version of it, I actually agree with you. I think there should be more work around multimodal. I mean, obviously with the ChatGPT, it can draw graphs for you nowadays, right? You should actually, like I tried recently, was like some data analysis stuff. It's amazing. It does a fantastic job. It just gives you all the right graphs. But I think specifically, maybe with voice, like one thing that I haven't seen done very well, and maybe it's just sort of what I'm purveying, is voice in, text out, right? Like I'm using voice to ask a question, but like you will speak back to me or not, but also allow me to read the output, because I'm a faster reader than I'm a listener. And I'm sure that's different from different people. And like just being able to adjust to that, I think it's going to be quite interesting.
Very cool response. Yeah, Devin, what you have?
Sorry, Ross.
Go ahead.
Yeah, the thing about voice, it seems like there's something missing, right? When I talk to Ross and we're not in a meeting, I'm typing, I'm texting, right? I'm never going to do speech to text. It's just not part of my habit, right? I don't think it is for most people. And we're not going to hop on a phone call, which a phone call is probably more akin to what it is like talking with a voice AI right now. There's no facial expression. There's no face at all.
Yep.
And so it's more of just like literal audio back and forth, like it's a phone call. But if it's like Ross, right? If Ross was the AI, it's like I never actually. I mean, sometimes we do a phone call, but at rare occasions, right? Mostly we're chatting in Slack or hopping in a meet, and I can't hop in a meet with an AI because, like, what's the point? There's no face, there's no like additional communication layers. But yeah, it's interesting to see where that's going to go, the voice thing.
Yeah, I think I suspect that might be a big part of it too. Like we are cued so much on facial expression, right? I think, Devin, what you said reminds me a lot of like there's this, I think, research a couple of years ago or something that was talking about how, like, with the latency that, let's say, video communications introduces, it's sometimes harder to interpret like micro expressions, and it like puts on more burden on us. There's something about this that I think we are just not fully understanding. It's my guess, but I'm speculating.
Yeah, I think the initial thing that came to my head, Chong Han, when you brought it up, was one, the technology, as you said, is it just maybe not quite there? The interface just isn't relatable. I don't know. They're pretty good. So maybe yes, maybe no. And I think it's just a cultural thing. People don't like picking up the phone. More and more people like texting. I'm 37. I think my generation, we're okay on the phone, but we don't love it. The generations below me, I think, disdain it more and more than even my generation. So I think it may also come down to that. But there's got to be a swing. Everything in society has swings. Maybe at this point, I feel like it's already swinging back to like start picking up the phone a little bit more, start having Zoom conversations, because now we're working more remotely, and that requires this type of behavior. So, I think things might change there. But anyway, good thought process there.
A fun speculation, right? I've been thinking about this quite a bit, so it's a bit tangential and off topic. But we are currently in the generation where short form videos is very natural, right? Like both in terms of how you communicate and how you like people go to public places and they take a phone out and they capture videos of things. So I do wonder, right? Maybe that sort of extension of that behavior will be something that shows up pretty soon.
Cool. Nice way to cap that off, Chong Han, but I agree. Couldn't agree more. Let's get back to my last, maybe little technical question. So just testing prototypes. So how do you prototype or test user flows when the behavior of the AI agent is non-deterministic or hard to simulate? Because that's sort of generally where we are here, especially when we're pushing the limits of AI agents. So what do you think in there? I know it's a bit of a tricky question.
To put on the designer's hat, I'm going to make it an engineer's problem. No,
nice. Love it.
I think, That's a high level question to this, and there's a like specific level question to that. I think the high level question is the high level answer here is basically as design, right? Part of the work that we need to figure out, let's say maybe at the first part of the process is who's the user, what they're trying to do, what their goals, right, all that kind of stuff. And if you understand sort of AI as a material enough, right, even without being specific, right, because I think maybe the question sort of assumption embedded in your question is that AI as a technology is surprising in what is easy and surprising in what is hard, right? It's sort of the problem with it. It's like things that you assume will be easy, sometimes it's super hard, and things that you assume is hard, like it's super easy, right? So I think the question is, what are you trying to solve? Let's say, you're talking to someone about optimizing, I don't know, like building some workflows to go through their taxes and, go through their taxes and file some sort of like, financial statement, whatever, right? And I think in those cases, you could, if the task is well defined, the behavior of the AI is not terribly difficult, right? The question then becomes sort of to some degree, can you shape it there, right? Like, can you shape the technology to do the things that you want it to do? And I think that's the second half of the question, which is sometimes you cannot, right? You simply cannot do that because for some reason the technology is not tuned for it, or whatever it is, then it just cannot be done. I think just I think it's sort of a level of like onion peeling, right? Where like, okay, so first we have clarity about who the user is, what the task is, and let's assume the AI is magic. What is the simplest thing? Okay, we discovered that AI is not magic now. So what are the places it's going to break? How do we sort of build, interception points or things like that? I think that's how I would think about it. And you kind of have to prototype it like as you discover the problems, right? Because, and maybe this is sort of a good place to sort of talk a bit about this. I actually wonder if designing with AI to some degree is prototyping with AI to some degree is interesting and similar to prototyping like social media. Right, I've been recently working on a project with a different client about building a community, and as when we're designing, a lot of assumptions we are sort of bringing in is pretty Pollyannish, right? We are building a community, connect people, they're gonna like share good things and support each other and help each other, and as we know from social media, that's not usually how things turn out, right? So as a designer, like when the user has so much control over what content goes in and out of like the platform that you're building, how do you sort of build around that? I think it has to be evolution, right? It's not something where you could be like, I have this design, it's perfect, and it's gonna like do all the good things and capture all the bad things. Like I just don't think that's how it works. So yeah.
That makes sense. Totally makes sense. And I think you killed that question. So move on to another one. This is just a question for me. It's a bit of a silly one, but I don't know. I like anthropomorphizing everything in front of me. It's just how my brain works. What do you think about AI agents having personalities in their UI UX? Do you think that is goofy? Do you think it helps, hurts? It's a broad question. I'm sure it's very dependent on your client, but how do you approach that? Or is it just like the personality is what it is? You kind of get what you get.
Oh, that's a tough one. I don't know. I mean, this whole thing around like, OpenAI did this blog post, right? I would say like 2 months ago, if I'm not wrong, where they were talking about how their agent was a little too eager to please, right?
Yeah.
Which sort of I think comes top to mind, which is really interesting because I think there's a question here where, like, how much does the personality help or hurt the effectiveness of the task that is being performed, right? It's probably one of the key questions here. I think that, let's say we're talking about a purely quote unquote B2B SaaS, right? Sort of like, I want you to do my taxes. Like, it should be nice. Do I care if it's super nice? I don't know, right? Like, actually, in fact, I prefer if I don't have to talk to you, like you, Ross, but you, the agent, right? But that's my preference. And maybe some people want like a very overly polite. I think to some degree it's a little like aesthetics, right? To some degree, you could think of it as like the visual language of an agent. Some people prefer like the Androids, they like the Mac OS, they like their skeuomorphic, and I think it's sort of fun and games until it sort of hurts performance. Perhaps is one way of thinking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, and then I'll get over to you, Devin, it's what you keep going back to, and it's always the right way to go back to. It's like, what's the user experience? Like, that's what we're talking about with UI, UX. What does the customer want? What's best for the customer? I can definitely see these things having personality. It's just like, I was staying at the Four Seasons in Boston a week or so ago. Obviously, like a very upscale hotel, and the concierge, the front desk, the way that they treat you is way different than the Marriott that I usually stay at, and I love my Marriotts, but I could see that also being part of the UI UX. If you're going to like the Ritz Carlton or you're buying a yacht through AI, I would assume you're going to have a very sophisticated, probably having a British accent. That's the only people I buy it from anyway.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, I think it'll just be tailored to the audience. And I don't think it'll be that different from how we train our human employees now, because I think that's what we've come to expect for a reason. Like, you want hospitality in the hospitality setting. If you go to Peter Luger's steakhouse in New York, you want to get screamed at for ordering the wrong steak. That's why these are all experiences. So I think that they'll just kind of go along with what we currently are doing with personalities. It'd just be the AI agent.
Sorry, I know, Devin, you have a question, but can I ask add a question thing here, right? I have a thought here where I wonder how much of this personality do we inscribe it to the AI agent, to the brand, or to the person, right? I think that's important because I think the question in my mind, I don't know the answer to this, is do we like one of the reasons why I mean, it sounds a bit weird, but one of the reasons why I'm polite with you is like, I like your friendship and I enjoy your company and I like you to like me. I don't have that relationship with the AI, right? So, but maybe at the same time, if I'm, like you said, right, if I'm interacting with the AI that's representing the Ritz-Carlton, it might be a different thing. I expect it to be courteous and right, because that's sort of like the brand promise. So it's an interesting question. I think it's a very big social cultural question, is my opinion. So
yeah, no, I think that's a good way to cap it. And Devin, I know you had some thoughts, but you're right. It's a very large topic, but I think you covered exactly the general thought process. But Devin, what do you have on your mind?
Well, I was actually going to piggyback on what you were saying, Ross. I think like that is an area to compete, right? That's an area to differentiate yourself. I think more and more of these systems are going to be based on their performance output, right? Like one thing will be able to accomplish certain tasks better than another, and it all comes down to like how you prompt it and what data you give access to, whatever. Part of that competing one system versus another is like, well, how well do people want to use it? Basically, do people want to talk to it? Like we're already seeing this with voice AI stuff, right? You send a country Southern accent to people who are in the South. You send a New York accent to people who are in the Northeast, and it's just like natural to kind of make that just make people more comfortable, right? Like interacting with that system. So I think it'll be one of those things that people try to compete on, but like anything, right? The Ritz-Carlton can afford to pay for the best concierge who has the best training, because they have the money to do that. Now you can have the best concierge in the form of AI all the way down to the Marriott and whatever else. And so like now the bar has been raised on like what is actually good hospitality, and then people will figure out how do we differentiate ourselves further in the hospitality realm, right? Maybe it's not personality, maybe it's not like making people feel comfortable in those environments, maybe it's something else.
No, that's great. And Devin, and just sort of to sort of add on to what you're saying, right? I think what's interesting here is there's so much cultural context that is being embedded in language, how we speak, how we hear, right? What we're comfortable with listening to, and things like that. And I think technology in the past has been very unifying, right? Like like they said, the American sort of exported a lot of culture through the internet. And the question is like, is anyone thinking about diversity in terms of like accents, for example, or I think there's more work that's being done here, and it's just fascinating.
Yeah, well said. I think just going back to just the basics, which I think is important, and maybe I lost sight of even, we're very tribal as human beings. It just is what it is. And hearing people like what Devin was saying that sound like you, that look like you now, AI, who knows, I guess the avatar would look like you. I don't know, but that seems to be important to humans. Hopefully, we're becoming more of a melting pot and these things seem to matter less and less. But you're right, in the South, speaking like a Yankee still makes a difference to them. And I understand that. And when a Southerner comes up here, I'm always like, where are you from? Or if they have a British accent, do you sound like you're from London? Anyway, like that kind of stuff I think will still persist with the AI agents, but I'm digressing a little bit. one or two more questions, and then we'll open up for the group for any questions if they have any. So maybe start thinking of some questions if you guys have. But one question here. Let's see. Yeah, how do you? This will be my last question. It's a pretty charged one. It's just like the future of UI UX. You've touched on it a few times, but just to put it in just a bow, a long clip from you. What is the future of UI UX with the understanding that the role of the interface design is going to be evolving as agents become more proactive and less reactive? So what's that future looking like, and what are those challenges for people like you in the UI UX industry to overcome?
Yeah. So I'm going to speak specifically to the technology side of it, because I think there is a practice side of like what does design need to do, and I think we could talk about that if it's interesting. But I was looking at Ben Evans' report yesterday, and I think this sort of basically corresponds with my idea, my understanding of sort of UI in terms of the broad waves over the last, let's say, 30 years. Right. So if you think about it, like GUI, like the 80s, the Windows 3.0, like that, there's a whole wave of desktop GUI as sort of the fundamental interface paradigm.
Right.
There's an internet, right, circle like 2000 and 2000s, right, that sort of lasted around like 2010 or so. That is, the internet, sort of the diversity of internet and the technologies that it enables, and sort of the design that it brought to. And there is mobile, right? Like if you think about the early days of mobile, like there's a lot of excitement and changes and evolution in that as well. I believe we are in the beginning stages, especially now that we've discovered, like with Agentic AI, right? You can start delegating. I think there's going to be a lot of implications there. I'm actually broadly in agreement with, obviously I'm agreement with, like, Johnny Ivan, they OpenAI did this whole announcement a couple of days ago. And I think part of, I forget if this is part of the talk that he gave at Stripe or the announcement, right? I think the implication here is that we are going to be, there's going to be a new class of devices, right? I think that is correct, because we are shaped by the physical sort of interface that is available to us, right? If we are all using, let's say, desktops, I think the AI product will be very different than something that's driven on mobile, or maybe even something like a humane pin or whatever that new form of factor is. And I think that's gonna be the evolution to watch out for the next few years, is my guess, right? I do, for example, one thing that I thought, we'll see if I'm proven right or wrong. I personally think, and I thought this for a couple of years now, that the AirPods, it's one of the most potent delivery for AI, right? So far they haven't done too much with it, because they're not terribly expensive, like $200, and everyone has it, right? It's connected to your phone, you can do all these things, but so far they're not doing very much with it. But we'll see, right? I think that's and that whole space would change. I think the question sort of, like, not the question, the assumption here is also like, in the future of the wildest dreams of the very optimistic AI people, right? Like, we don't have to do anything. We wake up and the AI will do everything, right? Like, there's no UI in this world. I don't think that's necessarily going to happen, but yeah, I think it will change. I don't know what it is. And I think we're at the beginning of the wave right now, which is sort of actually really interesting and exciting. And maybe the last thing I'll say there is, like, I'm not personally working the hardware side of things, but I find that to be a very fascinating space to be in.
Yeah, I certainly know with your AR background, you're working on some really cool stuff in operating rooms to see idiots like me if I left a scalpel in a body or I left a sponge. Happens all the time, unfortunately. Foreign bodies, usually an intern. Fortunately never happened to me, but anyway, I won't go through some stories I know. It's an interesting point you bring up about Apple. I didn't really think about it, but I'm using their AirPods now. This is a pretty natural extension, yet they haven't done much with it. They've jumped into challenging Neuralink, though. They've partnered with this Australian company to basically do the same thing as Neuralink, and they're going to use the Apple software, which Devin has mentioned he's skeptical that it'll work. But, they're jumping right to that, even though they've had this not implanted in my brain for years now. So I don't know. I'm not part of Apple. I'm sure they have reasons for that.
Sorry, I just want to mention one thing. I don't know if you've experienced it. I think they shipped this in the most recent, I think iOS is probably the one, or maybe it's WatchOS. But like now they do like detection, gesture detection, right? You could nod your head, you could like shake your head. There's a bunch more embodied work that's being done here. I suspect we'll see a lot more of that coming in as in the next few years. Yeah.
Yeah, and those are just simple accelerometers anyway that we've had forever. That would be easy stuff that actually would make a difference. Not to go off too much on a tangent, I think I've shared the story when we were in the Senate, the House in Congress, at the U.S. Capitol. There was a company that was using the Google or the Apple goggles, and that detects where your eyes are going.
Leo, how are you guys?
Sorry, Zach.
Me escucha. Let me see. How about now? Try again.
I think Zach is on another call there, so we'll just pump on through. Okay, he's on mute. Cool. Zach usually has some good stuff to say, especially around this. But anyway, that was cool that it was tracking my eyes and whatnot. Okay, Chong Han, last question, and then I'm going to open up for questions to anyone. So please think of some questions if you have any interest. All right, gun to your head, but no gun to your head. Just what do you think? AI agents, are they the future? An agentic operating system, swarm of AI agents hooked up to a centralized agentic database, just keeping it simple. Is that the future of business, or are we just going down the wrong path, or is it going to be some combination?
I think the short answer.
Our entire business is based on AI agents, by the way, so no pressure.
I think the short answer is we will see, like, there will be a mass adoption of AI agents, is my guess. However, it's not a one-to-one replacement of jobs. It's also my guess, right? I think, it will reshape organizations 100% for sure. But I don't know. I think not to say I don't know. I think we can see that, like, someone said this before, which I think is correct, which is like the AI right now is as bad as it could be, right? We're at the worst point of AI development in history right now. And I think there are a few different paths where this could go. And I don't know, because when you speculate on this, it gets really, like, it gets down the slippery slope really, really fast. My guess is we're going to end somewhere in the middle, where there's going to be a bunch of things where, you don't have to do anymore and they will do it for you. And there's some things where you have to make decisions, right? Because at the end of the day, like, let's take the thing that you postulate, right? Let's say we have an infinite amount of AI agents. The question I have would be, am I making all the decisions? Am I talking to them all day and be like, hey, agent 1, do this, agent 2, do this, hey, agent 3, you did this wrong, right? And then in that sense, like, how is it different than, like, working with a bunch of employees? I quote unquote, I would rather go play golf and do something else, and not like right. So like, then you go back to the same, like, I'm going to hire someone to like delegate, blah, blah, blah. It's just the form is different, right? Just to take that example to a conclusion, right? So I don't know. I think I don't know. That's how I say. But like, it will change. Yeah,
it'll definitely change. And look, no one knows. I think we're on the same line. I don't think there's going to be this huge unemployment. I think there'll be restructuring of jobs. We're seeing that CEOs are making a difference in doing that. They're looking for brand new job descriptions. So anyway, we'll see how that all goes. So question time. I'll open up with Andrew Gill again. Gill has a good question, and you have to rank these 1, 2, 3. You can't wiggle out of this one, Chong Han. Just kidding. You could do whatever you want here, but what's the priority? How would you rank it in UI UX? Beauty, utility, and simplicity.
Utility, simplicity, beauty. 1 to 3.
Yeah, good. That's kind of how I was seeing it. Awesome. Got another great question. Thanks there. So Chong Han, do you have any interesting apps or prompts you use, or have you used to help with crafting a good UI UX? Let me see. So Chong Han, do you have any interesting apps or prompts you use, or any that you've used to help with crafting a good UI UX?
Yeah, I think the things I use AI for design is not that different from it's not that let me rephrase this. The things I use AI for is to sort of diversify my thinking as opposed to automate today. I think that's a lot of what I'm using it for. So for example, like I really like using AI to brainstorm. I think it's probably one of the best brainstorming things that has ever been invented. And I think a lot of design is about brainstorming, right? Like you're thinking about things that like I'm trying to design this app for XYZ, and give me some variations, critique it, push it to the extreme, like who are the users. There's a lot of things that AI is really, really good at. I find deep research to be quite fascinating, just like getting you a good sense. Because I think a lot of the work that designers do is, like, I think firstly you discover the problem, then you discover the solution. And in the problem discovery phase, I mean, it's nothing really replaces talking to people. You kind of have to still do that, but it's a lot of like time saving things, like, what questions should I ask Ross if I'm interviewing him, like things like that. And on the discovery phase, right, like just really pushing the ideas, like, oh, okay, I'm thinking about approaching this way, XYZ. How do I change it, critique it? I find that to be very helpful. What are the different ways that this could be done? And I think more recently, and I think this is sort of what designers are discovering too, the opportunity cost or the cost of generating a solution is faster now, right? So let's say I have three ideas of how to solve this. In the past, it's gonna, like, we are either gonna draw a Figma and commit to it and spend 3 weeks building the prototype, and at the end of it, everyone's like, oh, we have already spent 3 weeks, let's not change it. Now, like, everything's a lot cheaper to build, so you can get to low fidelity things a lot faster. You're less precious with it. That's what I found in my practice to be true. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So I think that's, I'm not sure if that's helpful, but I really like using AI to sort of challenge ideas, critique ideas, push ideas. Like it's like a second voice, really. Yeah.
So is it mostly ChatGPT deep research that you're using, or is there Claude or another tool?
ChatGPT is my primary way of doing it. I sometimes switch. It's kind of funny. Sometimes I'll be like, I don't know if I like what you said, ChatGPT, and I'm gonna go to Claude and see if it gives me the same answer.
And what usually do you get between the two? Well, what's been your experience?
They are remarkably consistent, I would say. I don't know. It's a good question. I haven't really benchmarked it that hard. Like this morning, I was using it to like define. I think I was actually so for example, this morning, AI applications, like, tell me if I'm missing anything and what would you name them. And surprisingly, both of them gave me pretty similar answers. Right? I was like, okay, that's cool. Like, and then I asked Claude the question, like, is this based on something else, or am I making this up? And then he was like, you're making this up. I'm like, great.
Cool to see that they're consistent. At least then you have fewer doubts about that. I think we have time for maybe a question here or two. If anyone has any, certainly feel free to put it in the chat. If you, speaking of not speaking, if you want to type it out, or if you want to ask, just come off mute or raise your hand. Give it a second here. Gil, what do we got?
Yeah, I'm speculating, guessing as much as you are, as I am. I'm doing as much as you are. I think that maybe there are a few sort of baseline things that we can think about, right? Like there has to be some sort of input. There has to be some sort of output, right? I think the humane pin had a voice input. It had a voice output. It had like a laser, output as well. I think then the question is, where's the input and where's the output, right? Like, if you say it was an AirPods, like some sort of AirPods type device, that it sits here, then it's listening to you, right? I think this I feel like if it's a on-person kind of thing, it's going to be voice driven for a lot of reasons. But like if it's something else, like it sits on your desk, I think it's going to look different. Or maybe it's like a mirror that sits in your house, right? Because you wake up in the morning and you're having a stand up with like 10 of your agents, and you're like, okay, so what you guys done, right, yesterday? So I think it really, I think there's a lot of ways that this could go, right? I'm bullish on like smart glasses. I'm somewhat bullish on smart glasses. I think it's a debatable question whether everyone will wear glasses. I wear glasses, so I'm bullish on smart glasses. But there is also a aesthetic question there as well. I think, I mean, like I said, I think the AirPods is probably the best vehicle that is being imagined today. But yeah, I think that's the question. Is like, actually, I think the question here is, I think input is actually a less important question. I think output is a more important question, right? Like what okay, I'm gonna talk to my AirPods and like, hey, Agent One, like go, go do this. And then like, how do I know that it's done the thing? How do I get feedback? How do I correct it? I think those are very interesting ways that, maybe wearables. I think if people are open to wearables, like, Apple has a great ecosystem, honestly, but hey.
Do you think, like what happened was we basically consolidated all to a smartphone. And I kind of think we could have a more diverse explosion of like possible things. Like some people wear AirPods, or you wear AirPods when you're walking around, you wear glasses when you're doing meetings, maybe you have a screen when you want to do something else. And like, there's just like an explosion in different options for whatever you want, basically. The other is like, we do another run of like Apple and smartphones, where we just kind of all decide, yep, we're gonna get a smartphone, right? And they kind of slowly build off of that. What do you think there?
It's a tough one, right? Because I think a lot of it depends on adoption, right? If anyone is able to create a device that, let's say, majority of people in the US to start, right, is willing to pay, the price point of like $300, $500, like the way the iPhone is. I think these things are pretty rare, and if it happens, it will dominate, right? I think that's one of the reasons why, like Facebook, Meta spends so much time and money on, the reality labs, because they want to own that platform. And I think that the trickiness there is partially, how do you appeal to a mass enough audience for it to matter? And that's the $1 billion question, a $1 trillion question maybe in this case. But I think the flip side of that is that, you end up with silos, right? Like everyone, in the US has either Android or iOS, and now you are subjected to all their problems. Like, we might have a great idea, like, hey, Devin, let's build this amazing thing. And then you're like, the App Store policies are not going to allow it, blah, blah, blah. So it's a ecosystem question, in my opinion. Yeah.
Cool. I think we're out of time. Chong Han, I cannot thank you enough. Thanks so much for coming on. Really, everything that I could have hoped for and more came out of this. Thank you.
No,
any last words before we part here, Chong Han? I had a great time chatting with you as always.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm glad people are interested and excited about UX. I think I appreciate that. So thank you so much.
Awesome. Cool. All right. Well, everyone, hope to see you guys next week. We have a really good one with Adam Sandler. We're going to be talking about something kind of brand new. It's going to be just real world applications and implications of AI. Adam's going to talk about how it's affected his career in marketing, how he's overcome that, his current agency, how he's teaching his kids to use AI. One of his kids is about to be in college. The other one's 6. He has a male kid. It's going to be a very personal introspection into AI next week. So I think this is a really must see, and hope everyone will see you there. I also posted a link to our community. If you guys aren't members, sign up for free, and the VIP section has a whole bunch of really cool stuff that we are developing, and a lot of new stuff for people who have been in the VIP and left, or people currently in the VIP. Check out the community. There's a whole revamp going on. There are going to be tons of N8N hackathons, tokens for Devin to provide feedback on your N8N workflows, etc. So check that out. Chong Han, thank you again. And for those in the VIP section, Devin is hosting right now an hour together. So hope to see everyone there who's part of the VIP section. If you're not, sign up and you can join.